The afternoon was unusually warm for early spring, with sunlight filtering through the tall buildings and casting long shadows across the streets. People were going about their day as usual, some hurrying to catch buses, others carrying groceries, and a few sitting on benches watching the world go by. The neighborhood had its usual rhythm, the sound of car engines, distant sirens, and children laughing in the park down the block. No one expected what was about to happen to shatter the calm of the day. She had been walking home from the corner store, her bag light, her steps measured. The woman carried herself with quiet confidence, aware of her surroundings as she always had to be. Her life had taught her that being alert was not optional. It was a skill she had honed over the years, and today that skill would be tested in a way she never imagined. She noticed the small things, the way a car slowed down as it passed, the tone of voices behind her, the subtle tension in the air, but she didn't immediately understand why things were about to get so intense. A block ahead, 2 police cruisers screeched to a halt. The sudden sound of tires against the pavement cut through the air, making people turn their heads. The officers jumped out, hands on their belts, eyes scanning the street. Their movements were fast, precise, and tense. Something had triggered them, something that made them believe danger was present. They were looking for a suspect described in a recent crime report, and their attention landed on her. The description had some similarities. Same general height, same skin tone, but it was not her. Yet in the heat of the moment, split-second decisions were being made, and assumptions can be dangerous. Before she could even realize what was happening, she heard the sharp, commanding voices of the officers shouting her name, ordering her to stop. The words were loud and harsh, cutting through the normal city noise. She froze instinctively, her heart pounding like a drum in her chest. A moment that had seemed ordinary, a regular walk home, turned into a surreal nightmare. Her mind raced, thinking about the possible consequences. She had seen too many videos of situations like this ending badly, and she knew how careful she had to be. Her hands lifted slowly, empty, trying to show that she was not a threat. But even in her calm gestures, the officers seemed uncertain, guns raised, their fingers tense on the triggers. The scene felt unreal. Cars slowed down, pedestrians paused mid-step, and everyone who witnessed it felt the weight of fear and tension in the air. People started pulling out their phones, capturing the moment, unsure if they were seeing a mistake or a tragedy waiting to happen. She kept her breathing steady, reminding herself to remain calm. Panic would only make things worse. She remembered the training she had gone through in life, learning how to handle high-stress situations, how to keep her body language non-threatening, how to communicate clearly under pressure. Her voice stayed low but firm as she spoke, trying to explain that there had been a mistake, that she was not the person they were looking for. But her words were almost lost in the chaos, the commands from the officers clashing with her explanations. The crowd began to gather, a mix of curiosity and concern pulling people closer. Some whispered to each other, sharing what they had heard about the incident, while others tried to stay far enough away, not wanting to get caught in whatever was about to unfold. Children peered from behind their parents, sensing tension without fully understanding it. The woman noticed their faces and felt a pang of fear, not for herself but for them, caught in a dangerous moment that had nothing to do with them. Her heart continued to race, but her mind worked with clarity. She knew she had to handle this carefully. She subtly moved her body to a stance that was cautious but not aggressive. Her eyes met the officer's eyes, trying to convey understanding, trying to show that she was aware and in control, not reckless or hostile. Every small movement mattered. One wrong step could escalate the situation beyond repair. The reality of being misidentified, of being judged by appearances alone, weighed heavily on her. She had experienced prejudice before, but never so directly. Never with guns pointed at her in broad daylight. The officers were tense too. They had been briefed, trained to react quickly to perceived threats, but now, uncertainty crept into their actions. They saw her hands, her calm demeanor, and yet the report in their ears and the adrenaline of the moment clouded their judgment. It was a dangerous combination, perception clashing with reality, fear mixing with authority, and lives hanging in the balance. The woman realized that to survive this moment, she had to stay calm, steady, and articulate. Every second counted, and the outcome could go either way. Nearby, a man walking his dog stopped abruptly, frozen by the sight. He had seen similar scenes in the news, and he feared the worst. He looked around. hoping someone would take control, hoping the officers would realize the mistake before it was too late. Others in the crowd felt the same mix of disbelief and fear. Some whispered warnings to the woman, telling her to comply, to stay calm, while others filmed silently, hoping the recording might help later if things went wrong. The tension was electric, visible on every face in the street. She remembered why she always carried herself with confidence, why she had trained herself to remain alert. Today, that training was not about self-defense from a stranger in a dark alley. It was about surviving a moment when assumptions and appearances could cost her life. She understood the stakes. She had faced challenges before in her life and in her work, but nothing like this. It was a confrontation where calm, clarity, and courage were her only allies. Her mind also raced through all possible outcomes. Could she talk her way out safely? Should she move in a certain way to show she meant no harm? Would the officers listen? Or had the momentum of their training and fear taken over? Each thought was sharp, slicing through the anxiety. She realized that controlling her own reactions was the only thing she could do in a situation spiraling so fast. Then she noticed the subtle changes in the officers' body language. Their fingers twitched, their eyes shifted, and the tension in their shoulders seemed to fluctuate as they processed her movements. She held their gaze steady, trying to communicate not with aggression but with clarity and respect. Her voice, calm and deliberate, rose above the chaos as she continued to assert that there had been a mistake. Slowly, she started to see the first hints of doubt in their eyes, a crack in the armor of authority shaped by fear. The crowd watched, holding their collective breath. It was impossible to predict what would happen next. The street that had moments ago been ordinary had transformed into a stage for a dramatic encounter, one that seemed like it belonged in the movies but was terrifyingly real. She felt the weight of every eye upon her, aware that any wrong move could spiral into tragedy. She reminded herself to breathe, to think, to act with intelligence and restraint. Even as the adrenaline surged, her training kicked in. Every step, every gesture was deliberate. She wasn't just a woman walking home anymore. She was someone asserting her right to exist without fear, someone who refused to be judged by assumptions, someone whose presence demanded recognition of her humanity. This moment was dangerous, but it was also an assertion of control in a world where appearances often dictated outcomes. Then, she saw a neighbor approach from across the street. The neighbor raised their hands, trying to intervene verbally, confirming that she was indeed who she claimed to be. The officer's expressions flickered, confusion, caution, and the first seeds of recognition. But the danger was far from over. Miscommunication, tension, and fear still ruled the moment. Every second stretched heavy and fragile like a rope over a deep chasm. As the first part of this encounter reached its climax, the woman remained calm, focused, and unwavering. Her awareness of the environment, the people, and the officers was total. She understood that survival depended on clear thinking, measured actions, and courage under pressure. The street was silent in a way that made every heartbeat thunder, every breath seem audible, every movement monumental. The afternoon light continued to fall across the buildings, painting long shadows, but the warmth of the sun did nothing to ease the tension. Every person watching felt the weight of the moment, the raw fear and the incredible bravery of a woman caught in a situation she had never asked for. The story of this encounter was only beginning, but it already left an impression that would not be forgotten by anyone who witnessed it. In this part of her life, everything was about to change in a way she never expected. The calm she maintained, the courage she drew upon, and the awareness she wielded like a shield were her only tools to navigate. To a moment that could have ended in disaster. The city around her continued its hum, indifferent to the drama unfolding in its streets, but for her, this was life or death, and every decision mattered. She felt the adrenaline still buzzing in her veins, but she forced herself to stay calm. Her mind was racing, yet every thought was measured. She knew that panic could ruin everything. She had trained herself through life's challenges and careful preparation to respond clearly under pressure. Today, that training mattered more than ever. She was facing a situation no one should ever face. Guns pointed at her while she tried to explain she was innocent. Her hand brushed the strap of her bag. Inside was a firearm she carried legally. Not for aggression, not for starting conflict, but for moments exactly like this. She knew that carrying a weapon was a responsibility, not a shield. She had practiced safety, she had practiced control, and she knew the consequences if she ever had to use it. Today, she didn't want confrontation. but she was prepared for defense if things went wrong. Her heart beat faster, but her body stayed steady. She lifted her voice again, calm but firm, trying to communicate with the officers. She explained who she was, her connection to the neighborhood, her presence there that afternoon. Her words were deliberate, clear, without panic. The officers still had their fingers on triggers, their eyes scanning for any hint of deception. She understood their caution even if it was directed wrongly. She wanted them to see reason, to see the truth through the tension, and to understand that she was not the person they were searching for. The people around her continued to watch, their phones capturing every second. Some whispered warnings, others prayed silently. Children peeked from behind parents' legs, sensing danger without understanding it fully. The woman noticed the small gestures of support around her. Even strangers understood the weight of the moment. Her mind briefly acknowledged that she was not alone, even in such a tense confrontation. There were witnesses, people who could attest to what happened, and that thought gave her a bit of reassurance. As the officers advanced, she shifted her stance slightly, careful not to make any sudden movements. Her hand hovered near her firearm, but she kept it hidden, not threatening. Her aim was control, not aggression. Every step she took was deliberate. Every word she spoke was measured. She understood that fear could escalate in an instant, that assumptions could lead to tragedy in a split second. The responsibility of navigating this moment weighed heavily on her, but she faced it with quiet determination. She remembered the countless times she had thought about her safety, the precautions she always took walking through the city. Today all those habits mattered. Her awareness of her surroundings, the position of the officers, the nearby traffic, the crowd, the buildings gave her options. If she needed to retreat, if she needed to act, she would. But her goal was not to escalate. Her goal was to make the officers see the truth without provoking a dangerous reaction. One of the officers shouted again, louder this time. The command was harsh, meant to assert control. She raised her hands slightly higher, keeping them visible, open, and non-threatening. Her voice remained calm, explaining that she was not the person they were looking for. She spoke clearly, repeating herself, emphasizing that she carried a legal firearm only for protection and had no intention of using it unless absolutely necessary. The officers paused, some glancing at each other, confused. The tension remained high, but cracks in the officers' certainty started to appear. A few neighbors stepped closer, cautiously, trying to communicate her identity to the officers. They spoke up, confirming her name, her residence, her presence in the neighborhood. Their voices added clarity but also complexity. The officers now had to process conflicting information: the report, the visual match, the words of the witnesses, and the calm insistence of the woman herself. Each officer's mind raced, balancing procedure, fear, and the possibility of a mistake. Her breathing stayed even. She spoke again, calmly, making sure her words were slow and deliberate. She wanted to make sure every officer understood that she was not a threat. Her eyes never left the officers' faces, reading micro-expressions, looking for signs that someone understood, looking for a chance to de-escalate the situation. Every detail mattered. A gesture, a glance, a tone of voice, it could change everything. She noticed the subtle ways the crowd reacted. Some people moved closer, trying to intervene verbally, confirming her identity. Others stepped back, unsure if they should get involved. Some continued recording, perhaps out of fear, perhaps to capture the truth. She felt the weight of every eye upon her, every silent judgment, every whispered warning. It was overwhelming, yet she stayed centered, understanding that her calmness could influence the outcome. Her hand remained near her firearm, a conscious decision. She would not make sudden movements, but she was ready if needed. She thought about the stories she had heard, the videos she had seen online where innocent people were harmed because assumptions were made too quickly. She would not allow herself to become a victim because someone else acted without clarity. Her preparation and mindset were her shields, and she relied on them fully. The officers seemed to hesitate now. Their commands grew less forceful, their movements slightly slower. Some lowered their weapons a tiny fraction, a sign of recognition dawning. She continued speaking, explaining who she was, repeating details that confirmed her identity. The words were calm, but behind them was a quiet determination that she would survive this moment with integrity. Time seemed to stretch. Seconds felt like minutes. Every movement mattered. The street, once ordinary, felt like a stage for life and death. Her heart pounded, yet her body stayed composed. She focused on the smallest details: the angle of the officers' stances, the placement of the crowd, the sound of distant traffic masking the tension around her. She understood that survival required both awareness and courage. A passerby finally called out to the officers, confirming her identity and her presence in the neighborhood. The officers' expressions changed slightly, a flicker of doubt replacing certainty. One officer lowered his weapon further, glancing at the other. The crowd sensed a shift, a moment of hope breaking through the fear. The woman continued to speak calmly, her voice steady, explaining that she carried a legal firearm but had no intention of using it unless necessary. Her words carried the weight of responsibility and self-control. The situation remained tense. Every observer knew how fragile it was. She understood that even one wrong word, one sudden movement could change everything. Her mind raced, planning her next steps, anticipating possible reactions, staying ready to act if needed. She was calm but alert, aware of the reality of the danger she faced. It was not fear that controlled her. It was preparation and clarity. The crowd began to murmur softly. Some expressed relief at the woman's calm demeanor, while others whispered about the officer's caution. Children remained close to their parents, sensing the danger without fully understanding it. The woman noticed them, feeling a mix of fear and responsibility. She was aware that the outcome of this moment could affect everyone around her, not just herself. Her composure became a shield not only for her but for those witnessing the scene. The officers slowly began to reassess. They started asking questions, trying to reconcile the report with the reality in front of them. The woman answered carefully, clearly, and calmly. She emphasized that she had no connection to the crime, that she was carrying a firearm legally, and that she posed no threat. Every word was deliberate, meant to de-escalate the situation without causing alarm. She felt a slight shift in the atmosphere. The officers' stances relaxed fractionally. Their voices became less forceful. Their eyes, once filled with tension, now searched for clarity. The woman continued to maintain her composure, understanding that this moment could still go wrong if missteps were made. Her entire being focused on one goal: survival and truth. The street, once chaotic with fear and confusion, began to settle slightly. Passers-by whispered to each other, realizing that a tragedy had almost occurred. Some recorded videos stopped while others continued quietly. The woman's presence, calm and controlled, influenced everyone around her. Even the officers had to adjust, acknowledging that the situation was not as they had assumed. She realized that her calmness, preparation, and awareness were her most powerful tools. The legal firearm she carried was not meant for aggression, but for defense if necessary. The tension in the air slowly shifted from imminent danger to careful observation. She had navigated the first phase of the confrontation with courage and intelligence. The crowd sensed the change. People exchanged glances, some relieved, some still cautious. The woman remained composed, her eyes never leaving the officers. She understood that the situation was far from resolved, but she had established control through calm and clarity. Her courage and awareness had begun to turn the tide. Time moved slowly. She continued to speak calmly, answering questions, confirming her identity, and maintaining a presence that was firm, but not threatening. Every movement was deliberate. Every word was calculated to de-escalate and clarify. She understood that even a single misstep could reverse the progress made. As the sun began to cast longer shadows across the street, the man remained a figure of calm amidst tension. She had survived the first stage of what could have become a disaster. Her courage, preparation, and clear thinking had prevented a tragedy. But she knew that the moment was not over. The officers still had to verify, the crowd still had to process, and the next steps could still be critical. She took a slow breath, keeping her mind sharp and her body steady. She knew that the next moments would test her further, but she also knew that her ability to stay calm, assert control, and communicate clearly would continue to guide her. In a world where assumptions and fear could lead to disaster, she had become the calm in the storm. The street remained tense, but the balance had begun to shift. She had taken the first steps toward resolving the misunderstanding, and the officers were beginning to see that she was not the threat they had assumed. The crowd, the children, the neighbors all witnessed a moment of courage, intelligence, and self-control in real life. And she continued walking the fine line between fear and control, knowing that every second, every word, every movement mattered. She was ready for whatever came next. The tension in the street did not ease even as the woman spoke calmly and the officers began to hesitate. The air felt thick, heavy, like something fragile was balancing on the edge. Everyone around sensed it. Passers-by, neighbors, children watching from a safe distance, even the officers themselves. It was a moment where assumptions, fear, and reality collided, and no one could predict how it would unfold. Every eye in the area seemed to be locked on her, waiting for the next move. She could feel the adrenaline still coursing through her body, but she kept her breathing steady. Her mind raced, thinking through every possible scenario, every reaction the officers could have. She knew that miscommunication had the potential to turn a dangerous situation into a fatal one. She had to navigate this moment with extreme care, using words, gestures, and presence to de-escalate. Every decision, no matter how small, carried immense weight. One officer stepped closer, his gun still raised but his movements slower, uncertain. He spoke, asking her to show identification, trying to reconcile what he saw with the report in his mind. She reached slowly into her bag, hands visible, and retrieved her ID. She handed it over deliberately, ensuring there were no sudden movements, no hint of threat. The officer's eyes scanned it quickly, his expression a mixture of surprise and confusion. This was not the person he expected to see, and he struggled to process the discrepancy. At the same time, neighbors and bystanders tried to speak up. They confirmed her name, explained that she lived in the area and that she had nothing to do with the crime. Their voices were calm but insistent. The woman nodded as they spoke, understanding the importance of witnesses. She had learned that in moments like this, support from others could be crucial, but even with the voices confirming her identity, the officers' tension did not fully disappear. They had to follow procedure, and their training told them to remain cautious until every detail was verified. The woman's hand still hovered near her firearm, though it was hidden and not intended to intimidate. She had no desire for conflict, but she understood that she needed to be prepared in case the situation escalated unexpectedly. Her life depended on staying alert, thinking quickly, and maintaining control. She observed every movement of the officers, every twitch of a finger, every glance at the crowd. Awareness was her shield, and she relied on it completely. One of the officers raised his voice, repeating commands more forcefully. The tension escalated again. She raised her hand slightly, speaking clearly. Insisting that she was not the person they were looking for, she repeated her words patiently, each sentence carefully constructed to reduce fear and clarify the misunderstanding. Her calmness contrasted with the officer's rising agitation, but she knew that persistence could break through confusion. Suddenly, a man from across the street stepped forward. He had witnessed her walking home earlier and recognized her immediately. He spoke loudly, confirming her identity, repeating her name and emphasizing that she had nothing to do with the reported crime. The crowd seemed to lean closer, sensing a breakthrough. The officers paused, their eyes flicking between the witnesses and the woman, trying to reconcile the conflicting information. The street seemed to hold its breath, every person sensing the delicate balance between resolution and disaster. The woman continued speaking calmly, explaining where she had been, what she had been doing, and why she had nothing to do with the crime. She emphasized her intent to comply with the law and her commitment to peaceful resolution. Her voice, steady and confident, began to shift the atmosphere slightly. The officers' movements became less rigid, though caution still dominated their posture. They were professionals, trained to act decisively, but now they had to think carefully about the truth before them. Despite the shifting dynamics, miscommunication lingered. One officer remained skeptical, questioning the witnesses and asking for more details. The woman understood that it was normal for fear to persist, but she also knew that patience and clarity could gradually dismantle the tension. She continued to speak calmly, repeating her statements when necessary, and making sure her gestures were non-threatening. Every second mattered, and she refused to let anxiety dictate her actions. The crowd reacted to the small cracks in authority. Some murmured in relief, sensing the potential resolution, while others whispered warnings, afraid the situation could still spiral out of control. Children remained close to their parents, wide-eyed and silent, witnessing the intensity of a real-life confrontation. Every person in the area became a part of the drama unfolding, whether they wanted to be or not. The woman remained focused, aware that her responsibility extended beyond herself. Her mind worked quickly, calculating risks and anticipating reactions. She realized that some officers might still act on their initial assumptions, even if others doubted. She adjusted her stance slightly, keeping her hands visible but ready, ensuring that she could respond safely if necessary. Her focus was on survival, on clarity, and on diffusing the misunderstanding without escalating violence. Time seemed to stretch. The tension on the street was palpable. Every glance, every whisper, every small movement carried enormous weight. The woman's calm presence began to influence the environment subtly. She could see it in the crowd's posture, in the officer's hesitation, and even in the subtle gestures of those trying to assist. Awareness and composure had begun to reshape the dynamics, though the danger was far from over. Then a neighbor stepped closer to the officers, speaking with authority and calm. They confirmed her identity again, providing context about her routine and presence in the area. The officers exchanged glances, processing the new information. Confusion and uncertainty mixed with a growing recognition that a serious mistake might have been made. The woman nodded quietly, acknowledging the support while maintaining her calm demeanor. Despite the growing clarity, the situation remained delicate. The officers were still on alert, and the possibility of misinterpretation lingered. The woman continued to communicate calmly, emphasizing her peaceful intent and legal right to carry a firearm for protection. She understood that trust could not be forced. It had to be demonstrated through calm actions and clear communication. A subtle shift began to take place. The officers' gestures became less aggressive, their voices less forceful. They were beginning to listen, to consider the reality in front of them. The woman continued speaking steadily, reinforcing her position with clarity and calmness. Each word was deliberate, each movement controlled as she navigated the fragile moment with intelligence and courage. The street felt like it existed in slow motion. Every observer, every passerby, every witness seemed to hang on her every action. She remained composed, aware that any sudden movement could trigger a reaction. She had become a central figure in a moment that combined fear, authority, and the urgent need for understanding. Her calmness and clarity began to influence everyone around her, subtly guiding the situation toward resolution. As the minutes passed, the woman's persistence began to pay off. The officers started lowering their weapons fractionally, making eye contact with each other and the witnesses. Confusion and doubt replaced some of the initial tension. Her patience, composure, and clear communication were gradually dismantling the misunderstanding. The crowd noticed the shift and whispered among themselves, sensing that a disaster had been narrowly avoided. Yet the situation was far from fully resolved. Some officers remained cautious, still questioning and observing her closely. She responded with calm, deliberate explanations, maintaining non-threatening body language. She knew that control in such moments was fragile, and that the smallest misstep could reverse the progress made. Her awareness and preparation became her guiding tools, balancing the fine line between caution and danger. Her hand stayed near her firearm, ready but not aggressive. She had no desire to use it, but she was aware of the reality of the situation. Survival required readiness, composure, and intelligence. Every glance, every gesture, every word was carefully chosen to maintain control and prevent escalation. The woman had learned through life's challenges how to handle high-stress situations, and this moment demanded the very best of her skills. The officers' voices gradually softened as they processed the information provided by witnesses and the woman herself. One officer cautiously asked more questions, seeking verification, while another began to lower his weapon further. The balance of the situation was shifting, though tension remained. The woman stayed calm, focused, and deliberate, aware that patience was still essential. The crowd began to feel the shift too. Murmurs of relief mixed with cautious observation. Children stayed close to parents, sensing the tension but also noticing the officer's change in demeanor. Passers-by who had frozen moments earlier now whispered softly, observing the unfolding scene. Every person watching became a participant in a moment where patience, communication, and courage determined the outcome. The woman continued to explain calmly, repeating key details, reinforcing her peaceful intent. and emphasizing that she posed no threat. Her voice, steady and clear, began to create a ripple of influence over the officers and the crowd. The tension remained, but the atmosphere was subtly moving toward resolution. The street, once a stage of potential disaster, was now slowly becoming a place where clarity and truth could prevail. Finally, a hint of recognition appeared in the officers' eyes. They glanced at the witnesses, the woman, and each other, beginning to realize the magnitude of the mistake. The woman remained composed, aware that even now caution was necessary. She understood that control was not guaranteed until the last gun was lowered and the situation was fully clarified. Minutes later, the officers lowered their weapons further, still cautious but beginning to accept the reality of the moment. The woman remained calm, her presence steady and deliberate, maintaining control over her movements and words. The tension in the street began to ease, though awareness of the fragility of the situation remained. The crowd exhaled collectively, sensing that the crisis had been averted, at least partially. Witnesses who had spoken up felt relief, while the woman remained poised, aware that the encounter was not yet completely resolved. Her ability to maintain calm, clarity, and awareness had prevented a tragedy, but vigilance was still necessary. She took a slow breath, keeping her mind sharp and her body steady. The situation had moved from near disaster to cautious understanding. Her calmness and preparation had shifted the dynamics, but she remained aware of the delicate balance. Every second still mattered. The air felt charged, heavy with the kind of tension that makes hearts pound and time seem to slow. After several minutes of careful explanation and verification, the woman could sense the officers were starting to grasp the truth. Their movements had become less rigid, their voices quieter, and the harsh commands had softened. But the moment was still fragile. One wrong move, one sudden word could reignite the fear and push the situation back toward danger. She knew she had to stay perfectly composed. She took a slow breath, steadying herself, and continued speaking in a calm, measured voice. She repeated her name and clarified her presence in the neighborhood, emphasizing that she was there for her daily routine, completely uninvolved in the reported crime. Her hands remained visible, open, relaxed, but her mind stayed alert. She knew the officers had to verify every word, and she was prepared to cooperate fully. This was not about asserting power. It was about surviving with dignity and ensuring no one was hurt. Nearby, neighbors and bystanders watched with wide eyes. Some had taken a step closer, hoping their voices could help resolve the misunderstanding. Others stayed back, uncertain whether to intervene further. Children clung to parents' legs, sensing the gravity of the moment. Every person present felt the tension, aware that they were witnessing a confrontation that could have ended in tragedy. Yet, despite the fear, there was a sense of hope building slowly, fragile but persistent. One officer, younger and more cautious, lowered his weapon slightly and glanced at his partner. His expression was a mixture of confusion, relief, and lingering tension. He had started to recognize her face, recalling encounters in the neighborhood that matched her description exactly. He exchanged a brief, almost imperceptible look with his colleague, who was still holding his gun just a little higher. Uncertainty etched across his features. That subtle shift was critical. The officers were starting to see reality through the cloud of fear and adrenaline. The woman continued to explain patiently. She spoke about her routine, the people she interacted with, and her connection to the neighborhood. Her voice was calm but deliberate, designed to reach the officer's reason rather than provoke emotion. She emphasized that she carried a firearm legally, for self-protection only, and that she had no intention of using it unless absolutely necessary. Every word, every gesture was carefully chosen to prevent escalation and clarify her innocence. Gradually, one officer stepped closer to her, lowering his weapon completely. His eyes searched hers, looking for honesty, for clarity. The woman met his gaze steadily, confident but cautious. She knew that her composure had begun to influence the situation. The officer's hand shook slightly, a small sign of the tension that had gripped him moments before. Yet now, the tremor was paired with recognition, an acknowledgement that the report had led them astray. Witnesses continued to speak up, providing confirmation of her identity. Their words, calm and assertive, added weight to her explanation. The other officer, still slightly tense, began to cross-reference details in his mind. The description in the report, the verification from neighbors, the woman's composed explanation. The shift was subtle but meaningful. Recognition was dawning and the immediate threat began to recede. Despite the improvement, the woman did not let her guard down. She knew that the situation was delicate and full resolution would require patience. She continued to speak clearly, calmly reinforcing her innocence. She explained how misidentifications could happen and how important it was to verify before acting. Her voice carried authority without aggression, conveying responsibility, awareness, and composure under pressure. The crowd noticed the change in the officers. They lowered their weapons further, though still cautious. Passers-by whispered among themselves, realizing that the woman's calm presence had helped prevent a potential tragedy. Some raised their phones to capture the moment, others simply watched, silent witnesses to the unfolding story. Children, still clinging to parents, began to relax slightly as the tension in the air softened. Then the officer who had stepped closer finally spoke, his voice quieter, more measured. He acknowledged that the woman was not the suspect, that the description in the report had been mistaken. He looked at her directly, and she returned his gaze without fear, demonstrating a calm courage that could not be ignored. She explained once more that she carried a firearm legally for protection, and that she had only maintained readiness because she had been placed in danger by a misunderstanding. Her honesty and poise resonated in the air, diffusing the lingering tension further. The other officer, still slightly tense, began to lower his weapon fully. His eyes scanned the witnesses, the woman, and the surroundings, as if confirming that the immediate threat had truly passed. The street, once electric with fear and possibility of violence, slowly began to settle. The woman had maintained control through calm communication, awareness, and measured presence. Her composure had been her shield, her intelligence her guide, and now it was leading the officers to recognition of their mistake. Neighbors approached carefully, offering support and confirmation. They explained her daily routine, her connections in the neighborhood, and her reputation for peaceful, responsible behavior. Their words reinforced the woman's explanation and helped solidify the officer's understanding. The crowd sensed the shift fully now, the collective anxiety easing, replaced by relief and quiet admiration for the woman's courage. She lowered her hands slightly, showing that she had no intention of using her firearm, and emphasized her willingness to cooperate fully. Her calmness, consistency, and patience were shaping the resolution. She had faced a moment that could have turned deadly, and she had managed it with intelligence and self-control. Every movement mattered, and she had moved with careful precision, ensuring no one was hurt. The officers now spoke to one another, comparing details and confirming the mistake. They apologized quietly, their voices low but sincere, acknowledging that their assumptions had led to a dangerous confrontation. The woman listened, maintaining her composure. She accepted the apology without anger, understanding that mistakes could happen under pressure, but also aware of the gravity of what had almost occurred. Her calm response helped further diffuse the tension, turning a near-tragic incident into a moment of clarity and understanding. Witnesses around the scene began to relax as well. The crowd that had been tense, fearful, and uncertain now began to disperse slightly, exchanging whispers of relief and admiration. People marveled at the woman's courage and poise, realizing how narrowly disaster had been avoided. The story of her calmness and intelligence in the face of danger was already taking shape in the minds of those present, a story that would be shared and remembered. The woman finally took a small step back, her movements slow and deliberate, showing that she was calm and unthreatening. She had maintained control throughout the ordeal, demonstrating patience, awareness, and courage. The officers now fully understood the mistake and the immediate danger had passed. Yet she remained vigilant, aware that even minor missteps could reignite tension. Her awareness, her preparation, and her composure had been the keys to navigating this moment safely. One officer spoke again, this time more formally, explaining that the report had been incorrect and that they were relieved to confirm her identity. He expressed gratitude for her cooperation and calmness, acknowledging the seriousness of the mistake. The woman listened, responding with quiet acknowledgement and continued composure. She understood the gravity of the situation and the importance of maintaining dignity, even in the face of a potentially dangerous misunderstanding. As the crowd began to disperse further, The woman felt the tension finally begin to release. Her heart rate slowed slightly, though she remained alert, understanding that moments like these left a lingering awareness. She had faced a life-threatening situation, navigated it with intelligence and composure, and survived without conflict. The street, once filled with fear and uncertainty, was gradually returning to its normal rhythm. Thanks to her courage and clarity, passers-by whispered to one another, admiring the woman's strength and calm under pressure. Some approached to thank her, expressing relief that the situation had not escalated. Others marveled at the officer's eventual recognition of their mistake. The woman acknowledged them politely, maintaining her composure, aware that the event had left a mark on everyone who witnessed it. Even as she continued to walk slowly toward safety, she remained aware of her surroundings. Her training, awareness, and preparation had guided her through the dangerous situation, but she knew the importance of vigilance in the aftermath. The officers had recognized the mistake. The crowd had begun to settle and the immediate danger had passed, yet the impact of the confrontation lingered. She reflected briefly on the fragility of life and the importance of patience, composure, and clarity. A few minutes of calm, careful thinking had prevented a tragedy. Her presence of mind, awareness of the surroundings, and careful communication had diffused a situation that could easily have ended in disaster. She had proven that courage and intelligence, even in the most tense moments, could shape outcomes and save lives. The officers finally lowered their weapons completely, and the street returned to a quieter rhythm. The woman took a slow breath, her body relaxing slightly while her mind remained sharp. She had survived a near-catastrophic situation, and she had done so with dignity and awareness. The witnesses, neighbors, and bystanders dispersed slowly, each carrying the story of what had occurred, a story of courage, calm, and intelligence in the face of danger. For the woman, the moment was life-changing. She had faced a direct threat, managed a misunderstanding with patience and clarity, and emerged unharmed. The officers had recognized their error, the crowd had witnessed her composure, and the situation had been safely resolved. Yet she knew the experience would remain with her forever, a reminder of how quickly assumptions and fear could escalate, and how calmness, awareness, and courage could prevent disaster. The street had returned to a quieter rhythm, but the echoes of what had just happened lingered. The adrenaline that had surged through the woman's body earlier slowly began to fade, leaving a mixture of relief, exhaustion, and lingering awareness. She walked carefully, taking slow breaths, aware that although the immediate danger had passed, the memory of the event would remain with her for a long time. Every step was measured not out of fear, but from the need to stay aware of her surroundings, a habit that had served her well throughout her life. Neighbors lingered, exchanging whispered comments about what had just occurred. Some spoke of the officer's quick response, though now tempered by recognition of their mistake. Others focused on the woman herself, expressing admiration for her calmness, intelligence, and courage. Children, still holding their parents' hands tightly, looked on with wide eyes, learning a lesson in human resilience without even realizing it. The street had been transformed, briefly, into a place where fear and misunderstanding collided, and yet it had ended with clarity and safety. As she walked toward her home, the woman reflected on how quickly life could change. One moment she had been doing something as ordinary as walking home from the store. The next she had been confronted with guns, mistaken identity, and the possibility of a tragic outcome. It was a jarring reminder of how fragile moments could be, and how important it was to remain composed, aware, and prepared for the unexpected. Her thoughts turned inward, replaying each decision she had made, each word spoken, each small gesture that had helped prevent disaster. The incident had drawn the attention of the neighborhood, and soon people began to share the story online. Videos taken by bystanders circulated quickly, showing her calm composure, her careful movements, and the officers gradually recognizing the mistake. The clips sparked a wave of conversation about policing, assumptions, and the importance of patience and communication. Many expressed relief that the situation had ended without violence, while others reflected on how easily such misunderstandings could turn tragic. The woman's actions became a quiet example of courage and intelligence in real life. She thought about the officers, their reactions, and the pressure they had been under. It was easy to be critical from a distance, but she understood that they were acting under fear and training. Mistakes had been made, but her focus remained on the lessons learned and the importance of remaining composed. She did not harbor anger, though she recognized the danger she had faced. Instead, she felt a sense of responsibility to herself, to her community, and to the memory of the moment that could have ended differently. Neighbors and friends reached out to her, offering support and expressing relief that she was safe. Some spoke of the fear they had felt watching the confrontation, while others marveled at her calmness and intelligence. She listened, responding with quiet acknowledgement, grateful for their concern, but also mindful of the fact that her role in the moment had required focus and restraint above all else. The experience had strengthened her awareness and confidence, even as it reminded her of life's unpredictability. The officers returned to their vehicles, continuing with internal procedures and official reports. The woman observed quietly, knowing that accountability was necessary, but she did not feel the need to impose judgment herself. She had survived the encounter, managed it with care, and ensured that no one was hurt. That alone was enough. She understood that mistakes were human, but courage, clarity, and preparation were the tools that allowed her to navigate the situation safely. In the days that followed, the neighborhood discussed the incident extensively. Conversations focused on the tension between authority and perception, on the importance of verification, and on how calm, clear thinking could prevent tragedy. The woman's actions became a topic of admiration, an example of how composure and awareness in high-pressure situations could change outcomes. People reflected on their own assumptions, on how quickly fear could escalate, and on the value of patience and observation.